Hi, this is David Rasmussen with Colorado Cinema Spotlight. Nice to have you join us. Today we're talking to Colorado filmmaker John McSween. Welcome, John. Great to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
Okay. Well, we always start these sessions off just finding a little bit about how it all got started for you. So maybe as a kid, did you get interested in films, or did it come along later, or how did it all start off?
I'd say both. I've been acting as long as I can remember, all throughout elementary school and middle school and high school, and even later than that, through my 20s. I always had a passion for it. I started painting and taking photos about the same time, early teens. My dad was a photographer, my mom was a painter. And there was just some kind of connection there. Art has always been a big part of myself. I kind of always identified myself as an artist. And at some point you have to realize, you know, in this day and age, art is movies. I mean, movies are the most powerful of all the art forms. In some ways, they're the combination of all the art forms. And if you want to be relevant, if you want your work to be seen, if you want to be able to, you know, get your work out there and have emotional resonance with it, I really think that filmmaking is the art form that is mandatory.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's great to have that background with your parents being in the arts to begin with, and then you building on it like that. Did you watch mostly movies when you were a kid? Watch a lot of television?
Both,
Did one
actually
influence you more than the other?
You know, I'm not sure if one influenced me more than the other, but I definitely watched a lot of movies and a lot of television, and I was a huge sci-fi junkie as a kid. And I think sci-fi television is pretty filmic in its nature, compressed story-wise and probably simplified story-wise. But Star Trek, both the original series and the Next Generation, The Twilight Zone, both deal with pretty big, complex themes and, you know, create stories around them that really simplify them and kind of put forth the theme pretty clearly.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. I loved it as a kid.
Yeah, but it's also that kind of unreal world of science fiction where anything can happen and you can go crazy with your imagination.
Right. There is a bit of escapism to science fiction, but at the same time, I think it's able to deal with contemporary social issues better than any other genre of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So it's kind of magical that way.
Yeah. So you say science fiction. Are there certain filmmakers that kind of inspired or that you found particularly interesting as you were growing up?
Yeah. I mean, once again, it gets back to Star Wars. I think that's a huge influence on any filmmaker.
Yeah.
David Lynch, who dabbled in science fiction, was always a big influence on me. Akira Kurosawa, he made a movie called Dreams, which was kind of had different vignettes, but one was a really post-apocalyptic world. I love the post-apocalypse. David Miller, Road Warrior, was a big influence. But you know, outside of that, I do love all sorts of filmmaking, all sorts of films, and I mean, Quentin Tarantino probably has a big effect on me as anybody. Federico Fellini.
Really?
I was when I was 16, I lived in Italy for a year, and I didn't know anything about Fellini. But when I got over there, it was, you know, thrown in my face pretty heavily because he is the beginning and the end of Italian cinema. Yeah. And I saw 8.5 for the first time, and it just really blew me away. That kind of surrealist vision, it really made me question, you know, wow, what am I doing here? You know, like, what are my motivations, and you know, what is even reality? Yeah. And then, you know, Amarcord, even further in that surrealist, crazy, colorful way. But the more I studied him, he actually started in kind of a neo-realist background, La Strada, The Knights of Calabria, his whole body of work. There's a ton of filmmakers. I mean, I love so many. Jean-Luc Godard was one. I remember I saw Breathless for the first time, and I was just like, that's so cool, you know. I just wanted to walk around like a Hollywood character, or Jean-Paul Belmondo pretending to be a Hollywood character. I saw Weekend for the first time when I was a teenager, and I didn't understand it at all, you know. And I rewound the video cassette and I watched it again like right away, and I was just like, what does this mean? Yeah, there's just so many.
Well, you got off to a great start watching all those wonderful films. Nowadays, we'd consider them indies. They weren't indies at all. They were just foreign films big in those countries. But a lot of Americans growing up didn't have that kind of exposure, especially in their teenage years at least. So you really were seeing the best filmmakers right off the beginning. That's great.
Yeah, I guess maybe I got lucky.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so so you did a lot of acting first.
Did a lot of acting, theater. When I was in my late teens, I got a Super 8 camera. And there was a pretty easy transition from photography to videography, or rather cinematography.
Yeah.
f-stops and film stock, ASA and shutter speeds. It's all kind of the same thing. I really didn't know how to edit though, and that really slowed me down until like the digital video thing came out. I remember I saw a movie called American Beauty, and one of the protagonists has a digital video camera and kind of records his whole life. It's like his journal. And I bought a little Handycam digital video camera and just recorded everything for years and years. But once again, it wasn't really filmmaking in that I didn't know how to edit, and I didn't have the capability to edit. And it was a little bit later, once Final Cut Pro came out, that I really started putting all the pieces together and making stories. And I think editing is the soul to cinema.
Huh. Did you make the transition pretty quickly then from acting to being the eye of the camera?
It's interesting. When I was in my early 20s, I was in a theater company called the Virus Theater Company down in New Mexico. And they did predominantly stage stuff, but in that era of the XL1 and the GH2, when the digital cameras were first coming out, they started doing some video, and I was a member of that company, and I was so drawn to video that I was like, yo, I'll be the guy that does the recording, does the videography. And it was a pretty natural transition between acting and cinematography.
Huh. Well, I'm sure it makes it easy for you to work with the actors, having had that experience in your background. Just out of curiosity, do you act in films at all now? And what's the difference between being on either side of the camera?
I don't act anymore. It's hard, There's that theory that it takes 10,000 hours to master a discipline. I've definitely got the 10,000 hours into acting, and I've definitely not mastered it, so I've left it in my past. But it does give me common language with actors, and it's hard, acting is, and direction is a hard thing to take. And I strive to be able to really clearly give usable direction and not confound them and not confuse them, and allow them to be the character. And I think, having an acting background probably helps with that.
Okay. Well, we need to start getting toward one of your films here, because I know everybody wants to see it. But one other thing I want to talk about before is your schooling, your education. Now, I understand that you didn't really go to film school and then make the films. You've made a couple films. Some of these we're going to see before you even went to film school, right? In fact,
I didn't go to film school until a couple years ago, and I was already 30. And I'd made a ton of films. I made a feature-length documentary that got into a film festival. I had shot a feature-length independent film, which didn't do so well. It wasn't too critically well received. But in Denver, I really found that the people that I was meeting that were really passionate and were putting out really good product had some kind of connection to the Colorado Film School up in Denver. And so I took the plunge, and I'm a student there now. And it's really helped out. It's a really amazing place. It happens to be a school, but really it's like a meeting ground for all sorts of really talented filmmakers in every discipline, be it acting or cinematography or editing or writing or directing. And it's really helped the quality of my movies in that I no longer do I have to do it all. I really have people that are extremely talented in each of their disciplines to come together, and it's that synergy of really amazingly talented people that make a movie. It's a team, it's a team sport, and it's through Colorado Film School that I really found my team.
Yeah, I could kind of see that judging from the credits I've watched in your films. There's a lot of people involved in these films, and previous filmmakers have said too that just coordinating the whole project is in many ways the most challenging part. I mean, you have to have the director's eye, but
it's funny, as a director, you often see a film by whoever, but in the end, it's that team sport. And while the director might be the coach, it's all those stars. Your cinematographer has to be amazing. Your editor has to be amazing. And if you miss one, if one of those disciplines is lacking, then the whole movie suffers for it. So I've been lucky enough to work with some really talented people.
Yeah, you won't be going toward animation then, where you do everything yourself and just one screen.
I respect that amazingly, but it's No.
Okay, all right. So let's look at a film. Let's look at the first one we're going to look at is Realization of the Shadow. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, give us a little background first about where the project came from, how you got the idea, how you pulled it together, maybe some things leading up to putting it together.
I was reading a lot of Carl Jung at the time. He wrote a book called Man and His Symbols, and I shot it with some friends in New Mexico, the Virus Theater Company, as well as the Monsoon Puppet Theater. Andrew Teagarden made the masks. He is a classically trained commedia dell'arte mask maker. And we shot it down in Silver City, New Mexico, in some old mines.
Yeah.
It's about 2 years old, I think.
So where did the original idea come from?
It's dreams. You know, a lot of my stuff comes from dreams and visions from my dreams, and just an exploration in my mind of, you know, why do I see these things in my dreams that I see? And the idea of the shadow is, at least in Jung's mind, it's that part of the consciousness which is not, that doesn't make itself readily available to the conscious ego. It's the part that is the conscious ego is unaware of. And it's not necessarily bad, but if you don't embrace it, if you kind of pile stuff into it and don't acknowledge that that's part of your personality, it kind of does become darker and darker, and it gains more power to the extent that it starts to project itself onto other people and even yourself. So your perception of reality, your perception of yourself kind of morphs into a darker thing. And it's because you're not embracing the shadow side of yourself.
Yeah. So you're doing a lot more in this film than just figuring out how to use the camera and staging things. I mean, you really are kind of working out a psychological theory for yourself. Is that right to say that?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Maybe. I mean, it's hard. I didn't say it right, but that's the idea. How did you feel about it when it was all over? Did you feel like it?
I really like it, actually.
Did what you wanted it to do?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely experimental. It was definitely an experiment. But whereas a lot of my experimental stuff, people watch and say, "Oh, that was cool."
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
This one, for some reason, people always say, "Oh, I like that," and let me tell you why. And they always really want to, you know, communicate with me and convey what they took from it. And it seems that most people that have watched it have actually taken something from it, and it means something really, you know, powerful to them. So it's always a pleasure when, you know, my work does bring something out of people and they want to talk to me about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a great one to start with then, for many reasons, besides it being a great film to begin with. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Let them see it. It's a short film, about 7 minutes. We're going to see the whole thing.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and talk about specific parts of it, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Here we go, folks. This is the first film by our filmmaker, John McSween. It's called The Realization of the Shadow. Welcome back. This is Colorado Cinema Spotlight, and that was the first film by our filmmaker this time, John McSween, Realization of the Shadow. Very interesting film. Really different than a lot of the other filmmakers that we've had here. So tell us a little bit about your filmmaking process. It's very experimental, evidently.
Yeah, well, this one is. I do both. I definitely love experimental film, though. And for me, experimental film is all about taking chances. It's about having an idea and going forth with it without knowing what the result is going to be. It's a lot like Salvador Dali. He once said about his art that he doesn't necessarily need to know what it means, but he's positive that it has a meaning. So I took this one from a dream and kind of worked it out from there, heavily influenced by Carl Jung. This one was a pretty small crew. It was just me.
Oh, okay.
And it was written by the 3 actors in front of the stage, all of whom were part of the Monsoon Puppet Theater down in New Mexico, Silver City, New Mexico. And it was pretty loose filming. We picked out a couple locations. It was all handheld. There wasn't really a shot list. There wasn't really a shooting schedule. And my direction was pretty limited. I kind of gave them an emotion and said, go with it. And it was a lot of long takes, and it took me a while to edit it, actually.
Yeah.
In the end, I probably had like 5 hours of footage, and I was looking for that story. And some people say that experimental film doesn't have story, but I think in the end, you know, the story is simply what happens from the beginning to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was really happy with how it turned out. It was a successful experiment, I guess.
Yeah. So when you say the 3 actors wrote it...
Well, I guess there was actually no writing, but in terms of their performance, their actions, how they created their character. And a lot of it had to do with the puppet theater. We have a huge stock of puppets down there, and they just picked, okay, this is going to be, you know, my angel, and this is going to be my death, and this is going to be my minor. And, you know, from their masks, a lot of their character came. Andrew Teagarden created the masks on this one. And he is, once again, the Monsoon Puppet Theater Company. He's classically trained, spent a lot of years doing the Commedia dell'arte, Commedia dell'arte thing. And his idea is that the mask can express an emotion just more clearly than any human can, without ambiguity. And I like it because it really, it empowers the actor to be something they're not, that, you know, maybe their own face doesn't even. It's kind of like Lord of the Flies, you know, by wearing a mask, you kind of become somebody else. And I think it, you don't see it too much in cinema these days, but I think it is kind of an expressionistic thing where the viewer is maybe put off a little bit by it, or really kind of taken back by it.
Because at first I didn't realize the main actor was wearing a mask. You know, I thought we saw him from behind, or it was the dark cave or something like that. And so the first time I saw a glimpse of the mask, I thought, he's wearing a mask. And then it wasn't sure after that I actually saw the mask, which was really surprising because it seemed like such a different type of film as it started out. But then the mask turned it around and made it something totally different altogether. And I think it's just what you're saying, that's the effect a mask has.
And it gets back to our shadow self and the extent to which our shadow can project what we see when we look in the mirror. At some point, we don't even see ourselves. We see this thing, this mask over our face, which is that part of us that we can't accept of ourselves. And this movie is kind of about that. Both the realization that we have a shadow, or that the protagonist becomes aware of his shadow self, but also the the process by which the shadow of our protagonist overtakes him.
Now, was it my imagination, or did the mask turn to black at the very end?
Yeah, it turns to black at the very end.
I thought I just noticed that in passing. Is there a real significance to that, or is that one of those kind of just whatever the audience wants to make of it? Sort of?
Well, I mean, the nature of experimental film is that it's open for interpretation. But it's definitely the point at which the shadow overtakes the man.
Okay, so we're going to see another experimental film of yours next, so maybe we'll go ahead and start talking about that one a little bit, because they are somewhat similar, even though they're very different feelings that they bring across. So this next one we're going to see is called The Hopeful Monster. Is that right? Hopeful Monster? All right. And this was done about the same time?
It was actually, it's a little bit older. It's about maybe a year older. It's all a blur. But yeah, this is my first high-definition experimental film, Whereas I've done several experimentals in the past back on standard definition. I'm not really happy with how that looks anymore. We're spoiled with HD. So this is the first thing I shot with my first HD camera. And it stars Teresa Dalberdine, who's a member of the Virus Theater Company. It too was shot in Silver City, New Mexico. And it's a little bit more clear. I think this one is a little less experimental, to the extent that I'm trying to say, 300 years in the future, after a nuclear holocaust, society's moved underground, and here's a story.
Yeah.
But once again, there's no dialogue, and the characters are wearing masks.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back and forth in time a little bit there,
yeah,
too, so it's not real linear either.
I'm a huge fan of flashbacks. It's actually my favorite film device, and I get made fun of pretty heavily at the Colorado Film School. Because some people think it's a cheap way to tell a story, but I think it's just a really effective way to show how the timeline of a life.
Yeah. So what was did you have a kind of a goal in producing this film, or was it just a good idea you wanted to go with, or what did this film come out of?
This one is it's a character that desperately wants to communicate with the world. And the thing that's stopping her is the world in which she lives, the society in which she lives. And I guess I'm trying to make a parallel between the roles that we're expected to play as Americans and masks that we are given at each successive level of achievement, and how those masks kind of prevent us from being honest and from communicating with others.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, it's a good film. Let's go ahead and watch it, and then it'll be interesting. I'm sure they'll enjoy watching this film and seeing what they can get out of it. And then we can talk a little bit more about what response you've had it and what your own response is to it when we come back, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's look at this next film by our filmmaker, John McSween. It's called Hopeful Monster. Welcome back to Colorado Cinema Spotlight. That was Hopeful Monster by our filmmaker John McSween. Very interesting film, very interesting. In some ways really like the first one, and in other ways very unique. So let's talk a little bit more about your experimental filmmaking process. How do you put together all these different aspects like the archival footage and the sound and the masks?
Right. So it starts with usually a vision from a dream. And this one for me was typing, and she's typing ones and zeros like binary code. And in my mind, it was just a desperate attempt to communicate. She's in a world all alone, and she is that puppet friend, and she's trying to just feel like a warm embrace from somebody. And it's just that solitude, that subterranean, post-apocalyptic, all alone in the world kind of feeling, wanting to feel, wanting to touch, wanting to speak, and the inability to really break through and communicate with somebody. So I found an actress, Teresa, who is really talented, doesn't require very much direction, and she really, through movements, and pretty much that's all she had was body language.
Script, yeah.
She was able to create a character around her masks. Now there is masks within masks in this one, and the flashbacks of her as a child having her mask placed on her, and yeah, just trying to show that story of who we are based on the world in which we live, and how it has such a profound impact that it kind of blocks our true self from ourselves even. This one I think is a little bit brighter in the end. I kind of think it is a hopeful story in that she does take off her mask at the very end and sees the world naked for the first time. So I had to get actors, all from the Virus Theater Company. I had to find a mask maker, Andrew Teagarden in this case. And then in the editing process, I went through to establish the world we live in through some old government stock footage of the nuclear tests down in New Mexico at the Trinity site, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it's also haunting and terrific at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ambiguous, and it's I don't know. It really kind of hits me, actually seeing a nuclear bomb go off, and I threw that at the beginning of it.
So you didn't know that to begin with, or?
No, I mean, I looked at it and I just didn't know. Oh yeah, right. I didn't know that I was going to put the nuclear bomb at the beginning. Huh. I was trying to establish the world, and I didn't know how to really do it. But then, a nuclear explosion.
The second you saw it, you thought, this is perfect.
This is it. And then there's that great violin song in there too, which is by a European, I'm pretty sure it's Czech, violinist Vaša Prihoda. That too is Creative Commons. And I just thought the mood was so overwhelming and kind of bittersweet. And it really kind of just set up the whole world for the short.
In a way, this kind of segues into the next film we're going to look at, or at least the clip from the next film that we're going to look at, because it's the same sort of dark world, this dark society that's going on. But now this film that we just saw was still pretty much a solo effort, right? Or you and the actress and a few other people. But now we're going to get into a project where you really had a lot of other people involved. Is that right?
Yeah, for Cannot Be Defied, I had a pretty huge crew. All in all, I would say it was 20 people as a crew on set, plus I think there was 17 extras, plus 4 principals, plus like a 5-person post-production team.
Yeah. And you didn't make this shift like from one film to the next. You must have kind of worked your way up.
Yeah, it was a slow progression.
Okay,
it was a slow progression. And a lot of it has to do with the Colorado Film School, just meeting people and working with them, and
So Cannot Be Defied is one that you've done since you started school.
Yeah, it was a film school production, and
that's really when you started working with larger and larger film crews.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of talented people. The cinematography by Luke Askelson is absolutely amazing, and the sound. If you one thing to look for or listen for in this short is the sound design, because it really makes everything happen, and that was done by Ross Smith, who's a genius.
Well, before we go into that, is there anything else that you wanted to say about Hopeful Monster? I mean, I think it's a successful film. I think it probably says what you wanted to say. It makes a very interesting point. Did it get many screenings or awards, or did you get much just personal response from it?
I showed it twice in Denver, once at the Emerging Filmmakers Project, and once at I think it's called the Indie Film Underground. It was at the DeQ Collection there on the 16th Street Mall. And it kind of got a lukewarm response. A few people were really, people came up to me and were like really taken aback by it. I remember one girl came up to me and said she couldn't stop crying because she was a mother and she felt like, this is what I'm doing to my child. But for the most part, that's an experimental where people kind of like, okay, kind of confused, but cool. Yeah. I'm not sure if it really hit people as much as Realization did.
Yeah. Yeah, they're both of the earlier films that we've watched are experimental films, and they really do kind of pull the audience in. And if the audience is willing to go along with them, I think they do carry you into that world, But I think now we're going into a film, Cannot Be Defied, that really you start to take charge as a filmmaker, and you're really, whether the audience wants to go along or not, they're there because it really engages you. So what did this project come out of? Was it for the school, or did you have an idea that you wanted to do, or?
It's interesting. I was working on another script, another idea, which was an adaptation, just like this one was. I was working on an adaptation of Franz Kafka's Hunger Artist. And I was passing the script around, trying to build a team. And it wasn't really, the team was kind of coming on pretty slowly. Yeah. Nobody was really liking it. And then I saw a movie called Bellflower by Evan Glodell, which came out, I think last year, 2011 maybe. And that had a profound impact on me. It's a movie about modern day California and it looks at modern day California in a post-apocalyptic light. And it presents Lord Humongous from The Road Warrior as being the end-all perfect example of what it means to be a man. Strong, ruling with an iron fist, leading your tribe, and giving everything, even your life, for your tribe. And there's a few images of Lord Humongous in the movie Bellflower that really kind of stuck with me. And some of them are just a single frame within the movie.
Yeah.
And I went back and I rewatched Road Warrior, and I had something about that character kind of just haunted me for a couple days. And I had just a crazy idea to plop him in to the old short story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. And he kind of represented everything about the North, the Union, strong, ruling with an iron fist. And it was kind of a way to exorcise him from my dreams. I didn't know what else to do. My sister's a poet, and she talks about having to write poems about people that haunt her. And she writes poems about muggers and Tom Waits, Robert Deneau. And this is my way of writing a poem to Lord Humongous.
That's interesting, because a lot of people would see this character as kind of being glorified in the film, but you're saying you're depicting him to kind of just like exercise him.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Interestingly enough, though, my 3-page script that I wrote, my adaptation, I passed around and people just loved it. And they started lining up and everybody wanted to jump on board. Funny. And a lot of really talented filmmakers.
Unlike The Hunger Artist.
And it's produced by Benjamin Dunn and Nathan Trumbull, and they did an excellent job. And we were able to get just a cool piece of filmmaking out of it. Okay. All right. Now going into this piece, is this when you started being much more particular about how you're going to organize the shoot and every shot? Yeah. With this piece, or it was a slow progression. This piece you finally got there, yeah. Yeah, it was a slow progression. But with this piece, I started with the script. Obviously, I broke it down into shots. I storyboarded it, and then I went to my cinematographer, and we talked a lot. So he made his own shot list. We combined shot list. We redid storyboards. We went to the locations. We shot photo boards. Wow. But it was about 3 months between between the script being written and us shooting it. Okay. And then the post-production process took another 3 or 4 months. It was kind of slow. Went to the. Even though you had it all planned out ahead of time, huh? Well, that's the thing, is that you shoot a movie and you plan it really well and you schedule it really well, and you get everything that you could possibly need, and then you get some more. And you've shot this movie that you've written, but then you start watching the dailies. You go and you watch to see what you shot, and you realize that you didn't really shoot the movie you wrote. You shot the movie that you shot, and I think editing is writing, and you really have to construct or reconstruct your movie in post. Okay. All right. Well, I think we should go ahead and take a look at a clip from the film. We can't watch the whole thing. Can you maybe set it up a little bit? Because I think we're coming in the middle. Can you maybe set up where we're at? Okay, so our protagonist, Peyton Farquhar, has been abducted by marauders, the ruling party in the post-apocalyptic world. And he is to be hanged if he doesn't betray his people and tell the Lord where they are hiding. And this is his decision. Will he tell, will he betray his people, or will he not? Okay. All right, let's watch this clip. All right, a clip from the film Cannot Be Defied by John McSween.
Greetings from the Lord. The Lord, wasteland. The big man with the master plan. The Duke of the Desert. The hard-boiled
Peyton, my friend, it pains me greatly to see you like this. Just tell us where they are. You are the only one who can stop the brutality. You alone can end the agony. Just tell us where they are, and I can let you live. Very well. Have it your way! Capture him! You are submerged. Where is your wife?
This is Colorado Cinema Spotlight, and that was a clip from a film by our filmmaker John McSween, Cannot Be Defied. Very different than the first two films we saw. Obviously much more narrative, even though it has the flashbacks and stuff going back and forth. How did you pull that together, the blocking the road?
Yeah, my producer, Ben Dunn, was able to do it. Eagle County is a small county up in, up on the Colorado River.
Okay.
And all it took was a phone call.
Yeah.
And a couple $100. But yeah, the sheriff and one of his deputies came out and they blocked the road in between takes for that chase scene. Mm-hmm. We did that we had 2 hours. And so, we had cameras on the road, cameras on a raft, cameras on the octocopter. And we, would take 5 minutes and drive one way and the traffic would be stopped. And then we call cut and the sheriffs would let the traffic go by. We'd reset, block off the road, and do another take. Okay. And we were able to get in 2 hours, get that scene. Yeah. And it was cool. The sheriffs had a lot of fun. They were really enjoying it. We had 20 marauders out there in their costumes and that vehicle, and the passerbys were really appreciative of seeing something like that out in their little lonely corner of Colorado.
Yeah, they weren't upset at the road being blocked and they couldn't get through.
It seems like everybody was having a good time.
They had a good time.
Yeah, appreciating them.
Now you mentioned an octocopter, is that it?
Yeah, that's right.
That's how you do the aerial shots?
Yeah, Matt Dunn over at Aerial Imaging Productions helped us out. They did 2 days of filming, and it was a real big help.
What is an octocopter?
It's actually not an octocopter. I misspoke. It's a helicopter, but it's remote controlled and it has multiple propellers. And there's a pilot who is guiding the helicopter around with his eyepiece, and then there's also a camera operator who's also got this virtual reality thing on, and he's guiding the camera around.
Wow! And you're doing all this at the same time. You don't have separate takes?
We did separate takes for the octocopter and for a regular camera.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Was there a favorite aerial shot that you had of the?
There's an establishing shot on the bridge that shows John Rezabek, our actor, playing Peyton on the plank, and then all the marauders, and then Ryan Wilkes as the kind of the antagonist there. And it ended up being our establishing shot. We spent most of that day on this really complicated dolly shot. Yeah. And it took forever, and it was all sorts of problems, and that was like the first thing I laid into the timeline in the rough cut. Mm-hmm. And the movie just wasn't working, and then I kind of came to the realization that I had to cut it out, that shot I really wanted. And so I did, but we needed an establishing shot, and so we used the aerial shot, which is a lot better. It really made it work.
Great. So what's the future really for this film? Because it's not even out there yet.
Yeah, well, I've recently submitted it to several film festivals, and we'll see how that goes. And then hopefully I'll put it up on Vimeo in several months.
Yeah. So you don't have any penchant for these really dark films. Why do you do this type of filmmaking, this type of story and this type of theme?
That's a good question.
I mean, I can sense it's coming out of the Jung kind of stuff that you were talking about earlier. It's not just that you want to deal with violence and sort of good and evil, a basic good and evil, but it's still, it's carrying through a lot of the stuff that you do.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways it gets down to exercising my own shadow side, exercising my own demons, and trying to deal with my own rage in a, socially acceptable format.
Yeah, yeah.
And in other ways, I think that the most interesting characters are the ones that are the most severely flawed. And I think flaw is story. So
Conflict, yeah.
usually when characters get together and everything works out and it's a happy ending, I'm bored.
Yeah.
I like a little bit more suffering, a little bit more tragedy to not only identify, but to be intrigued and to be entertained.
I can see too that, like in the female character from The Hopeful Monster, there's a lot of inner character going on there too, and I wouldn't be surprised if more of that comes out in your future films too. So we have another, just a trailer that we're going to look at here, and this is a project that's even newer than Cannot Be Defied, right?
Right. This project is called Peak of Terror, and me and Benjamin Dunn and Casey Murphy, we're all students at Colorado Film School. We co-wrote a script. It's a horror script between 10 and 20 pages in the horror genre. Those were the only requirements. And
this was for some sort of...
This is for a screenwriting competition.
Okay.
And the Stanley Film Festival, through the Stanley Hotel up in Estes Park, granted all the film schools in Colorado a production grant of $2,500.
Wow.
And our script won the school-wide competition to win our school's part of that. And we had 2.5 months to,
flush it out.
Well, not even, just shoot it basically and edit it. And once again, it was a huge cast and crew of amazing people that really pulled it together. And it's been hectic. It's all a blur. I'm barely here right now.
Yeah.
But once again, just amazing, talented people working in their discipline and just doing a great job. Luke Askelson, once again, was the DP, and Ross Smith was once again the sound designer, and they're just so masterful.
Yeah, so you had 2.5 months to put this together. How much of that time did you spend prep, and how much did you spend shooting and then editing after?
We spent about a month in pre-production, shot list, location scouting, getting permissions, casting.
Yeah.
Really lucky in our casting. Emily Emanuelson is the lead, and she was just phenomenal to work with. And the legend, Cougar, is the male lead, and he is a total pleasure to work with. Tony Gross is our comic relief. He's great. Michael Vasichik, who is amazing, was in it as well. So I was actually really lucky as a director to have amazing actors because I really didn't have to do too much. I said action and cut, and then they did the rest.
I'm sure it wasn't that easy, but if it was easy at all, that's great.
And then we spent 6 days in principal. I did another 6 days in pickups with a small crew or just myself. And then we spent about a month in post-production. Michael Tang is editing this one, and Ross Smith's doing the sound design. I'm really proud of it.
Okay, let's go ahead and look at the trailer for this one.
Okay.
Peak of Terror.
Peak of Terror.
All right, let's see this trailer for the new film by John McSween, Peak of Terror.
If it's not a bear, then what did this?
We need to shut this resort down.
You saw what that thing did.
I'm not gonna let anyone else do it.
Dynamite. Dynamite? Yeah. What'd you bring?
That was the trailer from Peak of Terror by our filmmaker, John McSween. Can't wait to see the movie. It's going to be great, I'm sure.
I think it will. I think it will.
Okay, so what was it like making this film? The shoot, he had to do that in just a few weeks? How did that go?
Yeah, it was really hectic. I would have liked to have a little bit more time for pre-production. Had an amazing crew though, and they really withstood a lot of abuse. Our first day was a 14-hour day, and we shot up in the mountains in Echo Lake Lodge, and it was snowing the whole day, and we shot till 2 o'clock in the morning in pretty much a blizzard.
Wow.
And everybody was freezing, and nobody had enough clothes, and it was was kind of a terrible experience for a lot of people, but at the same time, the ordeal made it just a wonderful thing. It's already like one of those really fond memories, like, oh, you remember that time when it was freezing and we were making a movie? And
since it worked out so well.
Since it worked out so well. And
yeah.
I think everybody's really happy with what, you know, the movie ended up being, and the shots are great, and it's, you know, when you can deliver a really good package, I think your crew is willing to suffer a little bit.
Yeah.
And they were troopers, because there was a lot of suffering on that set.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's obviously a horror film. You said that was the project to begin with, right? You had to write a horror film.
And it's going to show at the inaugural Stanley Film Festival at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Is it the only film, or did they have several?
It's part of a student showcase of all the film schools in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's also a regular film festival part of it. And yeah, we're in competition against all the other film schools, which,
good.
You know, hopefully we'll dominate.
Healthy rivalry, yeah. So I know you've got this one that you're just getting ready to release, and you've got this one that's just getting ready to screen. I understand you've got still another project that you're working on.
Yeah, I've recently written a script. It's a little bit different genre than all of the other ones we've watched today. Mm-hmm. It's a romance/adventure, and I'm making a sizzle reel, a short film that hopefully is good enough to find funding for a feature. The project's called Spanish Gold, and it's about one's first love and how that first love has such a powerful effect on us, kind of forever. You know, you can never really forget about it. And when our protagonist's first love returns to his hometown, how he kind of drops everything and it changes his life, and he'll do anything to recapture that. And there's an adventure side of it, and it kind of gets back to the name of Spanish Gold. Our protagonist, goes into the woods and kind of adventures through local legend in order to find the rumored Spanish gold.
Yeah.
But you know, you really can't recapture the past.
Yeah.
The tagline from it is from Shakespeare, from Midsummer Night's Dream, and it's, "The course of true love never did run smooth."
Right, right. Well, it sounds like in a very different vein than these other films that we've been watching.
Yes and no. I think cinematically it'll be maybe more colorful, and it's not horror, and it's not science fiction, and it's not experimental. It's a more conventional narrative, but it's dealing with similar themes, just about what we are as human beings, and you know what is inside of ourselves, both our acknowledged side and also our shadow side, and you know the effect that we have on each other.
That's great. Do you see yourself really staying a Colorado filmmaker? Or
yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of friends that have moved out to LA and they love it there, but I think, you know, I'm of the independent spirit, and especially, you know, with the talented people that I've met in Denver, there's good enough teams here to make movies that can compete on any level with, you know, anybody, any town. And I think Colorado has so much to offer, not only in its beautiful landscapes and its natural resources, but the fact that it's not LA, and that it is still a little bit of an anomaly when somebody drives up on a road and they see a film crew shooting. It's not an annoyance, it's kind of a happy surprise.
It's cool, yeah, yeah. Okay, all right, well, this has been great. All the films are really, really interesting. So if people want to track you down, see some of these things, see what they can see, how can we get in touch? How can they get in touch with you? How can they track you?
Yeah, you can find out about the film Spanish Gold on Facebook at facebook.com/Spanish Gold the Film. Like us, please. And then my videos are up on Vimeo, vimeo.com/McSween.
Okay, okay. No Facebook page or?
Yeah, I got a Facebook page. Feel free to like me, or it's not a fan page, so you can just be my friend if you want.
Okay, sounds great. Well, we've got a lot to look forward to, John. I can't wait to see these things when they come out and hear more about you in the future. Cougar Littlefield was on, one of our first directors, and it's good to hear that he's still doing things, and I'm sure the same is going to be true of you in the future as well. So thanks for being on Colorado Cinema Spotlight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This is Colorado Cinema Spotlight. I'm David Rasmussen. Thanks for joining us. If you're a filmmaker, if you know a filmmaker in Colorado, we'd love to have you on the show. So get in touch with us through our Facebook page, Colorado Cinema Spotlight. And we'd appreciate any comments that you might have for us as well, so you can post those on Facebook. Thanks a lot.